Hi everyone, my name's Lucas and this is Sports Stories SS15's. My guest is Floyd Steadman. You might have heard of him if you're interested in rugby. He's just released a book called A Week, One Summer, and he's a very interesting person to talk to. So I'll introduce you to Floyd now. Hi Floyd.
Hi Lucas, how are you?
I'm very good,
for
thank you.
your audience, for the audience sake, Lucas's dad and I were at school together and we played rugby together.
Yes, they did. So if you don't know Floyd, you might, if you're interested in rugby, you'll know that he's played for Saracens, which is very high level. So Floyd, tell us a bit about you, your story, playing for Saracens and what that was like back in the day.
Yeah, so let me give you a bit of background, and thanks for that, Lucas. So I've been lucky enough, I played for Saracens for 10 seasons, from 1980 to 1990. I was captain of Saracens for 4 seasons, actually it was 3.5 seasons. I'm a vice president of Saracens, and I'm only one of 14 that they've inducted into their Hall of Fame. So huge honour, but you have to remember that I was playing rugby, top level rugby, for Saracens in the days when we were theoretically amateur. So rugby only went professional in 1995, and I was playing from 1980 to 1990. So we also had our day jobs. You know, there were bankers and doctors, and I was a teacher. I was a young PE teacher. So you'd spend your days working like everybody else, and then most evenings you'll go and train. And it was hard, serious training as well, because at that level we were semi-pro. We were elite sportsmen, really training hard and playing hard and traveling the world, but also we had our day jobs.
So it was very busy, like at the time. You had a lot going on. Did you find it? So did you get, if you're semi-pro, you would have got paid a bit then, I'm guessing, every game or.
So theoretically, remember, rugby was fully amateur till 1995. So officially, no one got paid.
Okay. Officially.
Unofficially, your travel expenses were inflated.
Okay.
Some of the lucky guys might have been given cars. You know, if you were playing for a club like Harlequins or Wasps, they found jobs in the city for you. They found flats for you. So from my point of view, of course, I wasn't paid because we were amateurs, but the level that we trained and were playing to, financially, it was worth our while. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. And just on that then, so obviously rugby wasn't a professional sport at the time, but obviously sports like football and things like that, they were all getting paid. When you were younger and I'm guessing you went through academy stages and stuff like that, or county?
So we did see, that's interesting, Lucas, because back in the day we didn't have the setup. The professional footballers, they've always had their academies.
Yeah, of course.
So as a young PE teacher, I had an outstanding sportsman in my first school, Edgeworth School. This young man played football for England under 15s or England, whatever, the England schoolboys. He played rugby for England under 15s, because back in the early 1980s, England was under 15, not under 16. Okay. And he was a junior international athlete. This boy was a supreme sportsman. He went to football because obviously that's where the money and the glory was. Yeah. So football had this system. Rugby didn't have this system. So for people like me going through the ranks, one of the routes was you play school, and while you're at school, if you're lucky, you're playing county, division. And if you're really lucky for your England schoolboys, you then go off to study university. And that was the stepping stone. So either it was Oxford and Cambridge, which has always had that, you know, that snootiness about them. I went to one of the top sports colleges. People remember Loughborough because Loughborough's an outstanding college. Yeah. Back in the day, on a par with Loughborough, you had Borough Road, where I went. You had one in Cardiff called Cardiff College, which is one of the universities now. You had Marjon, which is now a university. There was one where you are in Leeds, which is a big sports university. Yeah. There was one in Scotland, Jordan Hill. So you had half a dozen of what we call the top sports colleges in the country. Yeah. And if you were a rugby player, you went through this college for 3 or 4 years. You then went off to your club. So for me, it was school, college, and while I was playing for the college, I played for English colleges and British colleges, English students. And then, and when I left college, I could choose between Harlequins, Wasps and Saracens.
And you chose Saracens.
I went to Saracens for 2 reasons. I looked at where was I going to get into the first team, easiest. Yeah. And Saracens was my best opportunity, see? But also being a black guy playing scrum half, and you have to remember, this is the days where black guys did not play scrum half. You know,
Yeah.
they were the wingers and centres. You know, Jerry Gusco, Chris Oatey, Andy Harriman, or they were the big forwards, Steve Agermo, Victor Blue, but they were never ever the scrum half. And I was playing scrum half, and I knew that if I was at Wasps or Harlequins, that would have been held against me. That makes sense.
It's interesting you say that, because even now, like, do you know Paolo Doggo? I'm sure you know who that is.
I do, yeah.
He did an interview very recently with Rugby Pass, I think it was.
I saw
and
it.
There's not a single black scrum half in the Premiership even now.
So here's the question for you, Lucas. I know you're interviewing me, but this is your question. Since I started playing senior rugby in 1980, I want you to name me another black English scrum half at the top end of the game.
I don't think I can think of one.
I asked Jason Leonard, the president of the RFU, we played rugby together, he's a good friend of mine. I asked him, he couldn't give me one.
No.
Mark Evans, chief executive of Harlequins, top man in rugby, he couldn't give me one. I am the only English black scrum half in the last 40 years. That is sad.
It's very sad.
You know, for people like you, you need to see people like me at the top end.
Exactly. Well, I play scrum half.
I know.
And all I can really relate to, I look at players like Will Genia, who plays in Australia. Aaron Smith's not really black, but he's a minority in his own right. Do you know what I mean? So these are the players that I can kind of look at and go, bit like them. But no one in the Premiership, no one in England apart from you. And obviously, why is
that, Lucas? Why is that then?
It's interesting. I think so. At my uni, we've been studying some in the race section. It's more about how minorities are put across in the media and stuff like that, and also about how they're filtered into positions and into different sports. And you see, generally speaking, the stereotypes that you get with black people in general are that they're fast, they're strong, they're athletic. And in sports like rugby, those attributes are kind of put towards wingers and centres and all these fast and powerful players. And they don't really, like even me, myself, as a scrum half now, like when I first started playing rugby, I was playing on the centres and in the wing because I was quick. I was generally quite quick. I have to say I've lost a bit of that now, but I was quite quick back then. So that's where I played. And then as I got a bit older is where I kind of started to move into the more controlling positions. But I think you don't see, like you said, you don't really see black people in these positions. So you're not gonna.
So let me give you this cynical position, Lucas. You're very, very polite and good in your answer. Like me, your dad played scrum half. Yeah. And your dad was very kind. I'm 3 years older than your dad, and he was very kind and said that I inspired him to play scrum half at school, which is great. Because I've always had a saying, you can't be what you can't see. You've got to see people like you being successful. Yeah. Now, the cynical position, and I know this because I do a lot of talking about this, it's all about unconscious bias. We all have unconscious bias. People look at me, they look at you, and what do they see? They see a young black man, they see an old black man. And when I was playing rugby as a young black man, no one, the selectors, the coaches, they couldn't see someone that looked like me playing scrum half. As you said, the people that looked like me were out in the backs, you know, the wingers, the fullbacks, the centres, or they were the big fours, but they were never ever the scrum halves. Yeah. And so I've had to challenge people to think again because I'm good. The other thing about it, Luke, has been quite blunt, is that there was a time, and even now, one or two people believe this, we black guys aren't intelligent enough to play scrum half and call it. Yeah. Now, I like proving people wrong. I've spent my life proving people wrong. Yeah. And that's what we have to do. You'll hear people say, you can't do this. And I say, yes, I can. And I'm going to prove to you that I can. So put bluntly, I don't think, people say, oh, people, it must be racism. It's not racism. It's unconscious bias. And that's a subtle difference. Yeah. For sure, 100%. And it's in our psyche. So it needs people like you and me and your dad and others to keep, in a polite way, pushing back and proving to people that A, we're good enough, B, we're intelligent enough, and C, we can do it. Yeah, 100%. Did that make sense? Yeah, definitely. And these are things that I've experienced the same thing, and I'm sure many black people in almost every sport can say that they've experienced very similar things all over the place. So
I think, like you said, it's like we've got to prove that we can do these things, and because we can. We're no different, you know. So yeah, it's interesting. And on the race thing, then, so when you were younger and growing up, how much of a factor was that for you in rugby, especially in rugby? But being going to these colleges and things like that, did you experience a lot of racism on the sidelines? Were people giving you things or people on other teams, even your teammates?
So in terms of the racism, and I'm going to say a subtle difference between the racism and the unconscious bias. I had unconscious bias against me every day. I had racism against me sometimes, not from my teammates, because one of the good things about rugby, and you know, your teammates, and you put your body on the line for them, and they put their body on the line for you, and you know, there's a bond, and you work hard together. So there was the banter, the unconscious bias, but there wasn't the racism. But some of the other teams I played, Lucas, there was some terrible racism. People calling me the most awful names, other players, but I knew why they were doing it. They were doing it to put me off my game, because you know, if you put the scrum half off, you destroy the team. Exactly. So I would just rise above it, smile at them. You know, I had my way of getting them back, but I couldn't be wound up by them, because on a personal level, they're winning, because I'm going to behave the way they want me to behave. And on a team's level, they're winning because they've put one of the playmakers off.
So it never really threw you off or made you think twice about playing or anything like that. It was always just...
No, I've been fiercely competitive, and I've always, when people say to me, "You can't do that, Floyd," or "You're not good enough," I like to prove them wrong. Because I've always known that I'm good enough. Here's one for you. When I was playing at Saracens, when I started in 1980, you know, Saracens were a big team, but out of the big teams, we were one of the weaker ones, and we were losing most matches. By the time I finished, my last game for Saracens, if we'd have beaten Wasps, we would have won what is now called the Premiership. You know, back in the day, we called it Division 1, the top league. And we were theoretically, we'd just been promoted. We were meant to be one of the favourites to go down. You know, we'd beaten Harlequins, we drew with Gloucester, we'd beaten all of these teams. And suddenly, Saracens were playing Wasp with the winner winning. And Wasp won, and they deserved to beat us. But that's a great position to be in, from being one of the weakest senior teams to being one of the strongest senior teams. You know, and all of that came under my leadership. Now, when I retired, so many people from the press and elsewhere said Floyd should have played for England, which is nice of them. I've always known that, but they should have been saying that 5 or 6 years previously.
Yeah, definitely. And that's kind of goes with what we were saying about the, you know, not racism, but just
the unconscious bias.
Unconscious bias, and not really recognizing that you can do it. And I don't know, maybe they might have been afraid of representing Black people at the time in rugby.
Well, look, I mean, going back to the racism, I'll give you 1 or 2 simple examples. And I'm going to use language which people might think is offensive, but Lucas, people have to know what was said to me.
Definitely.
I'm going to give you 2 examples. When I was captain of Saracens, and we went out, and I'm not going to tell you which team, but it's a big team in the West Country. And you know your rugby, so there's only 3 or 4 of them. And I led my team out, and you know, people think that football in the 80s had the monkey chance, no one else. Rugby had the monkey chance. I had people chanting at me, spitting at me, throwing things at me, really awful things. But the comment that I remembered actually wasn't a nasty comment. Someone shouted out, "Gosh, there were 3 of them." In other words, Saracens had the temerity to select 3 Black players. And what I say is, well done, Saracens. Because Saracens always were brave to make me, a young Black man, their captain. Again, Lucas, I was the first Black captain of a major rugby team. Another example I'm going to give you, so that you can't term that racism. That was unconscious bias. Just people, although there was some racist attitudes and chanting. Now you will know this, you know, you go for your university, you play in the first team for the first time, you drink something that's hopefully not too bad in the evening, and you sing a song. It still happens. You know, I got into the Borough Road team. Not many freshers got in because it was it's full of international athletes. And I got in after 3 or 4 weeks, and I was told to sing a song. Now everybody else could choose the song, Lucas, but I was told that and I put this in my book, I was told I had to sing the song Sambo Was a Lazy Coon, which you and I know is a shocking. It's so hurtful and rude and racist. But here's the thing. Those people, my teammates, they weren't racist. It was their own unconscious bias.
They just didn't.
And the language, Lucas, that was accepted back then, that's totally not accepted now.
100%.
And in my book, I tell that story in my book. I've had so many of my old college mates contact me and apologize.
Yeah.
They said, Floyd, we just didn't realize, we didn't think.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, like, people didn't realize at the time that even though they weren't saying it to be rude or necessarily horrible, they just didn't realize. And that's almost the saddest part of it, that it was so like you can't necessarily explain to people that they're doing something wrong if they don't even realize that they're doing something wrong. And then it takes.
So here's the thing, and Lucas, you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah.
But you see, again, you've got me. I do a lot of talks now on unconscious bias. So I was on the phone yesterday. I've got Surrey County Cricket Club, Glamorgan County Cricket Club, Leicestershire County. They're all trying to get me to go up and talk to their players and coaches. I go into many schools, I go into companies and banks, and I talk to them all about the challenges that people like us have had. But actually, people think that, it's really from me and your dad's generation and our parents coming from the Caribbean, the Windrush generation.
Yeah.
And I have to remind them of two things. There have been black people in England for over 1,000 years.
Yeah.
I'm now down in West Cornwall, where my wife used to live, as you know, her family are from. And St. Michael's Mount, which is a big, famous landmark 2 miles from me. The Phoenicians 1,000 years ago used to sail in and bring trade. Now, the Phoenicians were from Africa, darker skinned people, and some of them stayed. So there's been this, and that's that. The other thing about why is it that it's harder for people like me and you, darker skinned people? The bottom line is you've got 500 or 600 years of history of slavery and the empire. And the empire was all about English people going to these far-flung places where people were darker skinned and basically taking all that they had, taking their goods, taking their wealth, taking them and making them slaves. And so in the psyche for hundreds of years, the darker your skin, the lower your place in society. Yeah. And it's only now that my generation, your dad's generation, and your generation, and my son's generation, we are getting the academic success that you need to open doors. We are becoming successful. We are having a voice. Is this all making sense? Yeah, definitely. And it's good. It's obviously very good that that's happening now. It's a shame that it's taken so long, but I think it goes back to the point you're making earlier, that we have to constantly push back at the people, almost with the attitudes that you can't do this and you should be doing that instead, that you have to constantly push back. And you get these things now, we get the education and we get the opportunities that we wouldn't have had a long time ago, or not even that long ago. Lucas, you're absolutely right about that. You're absolutely right about that. And sorry to interject. I'm a headmaster. I'm always interjecting. Yes, okay. But the important thing is, and this is important, and I think me and your dad have both got a similar approach to this. And I know that our approach works. And that is, you must always push back. You must always call it out when you see things that are wrong. But, and this is important, it's how you do it. Yeah. If I do it in a very aggressive way, I'm reinforcing people's views on me being an angry, aggressive black man. Yeah, exactly. If I do it in a very calm, articulate way, A, I surprise them. Yeah. And B, I'm probably going to win them over. Yeah, definitely. And that's something that I think a lot of people my age would benefit. This is part of the reason why I wanted you on here, Floyd, because I think a lot of people my age who don't necessarily know how to do that can learn from people like you, people in positions where they've gone through all of these hardships and kind of come out on the other side by doing it the right way, and not obviously it's very difficult not to get angry and get frustrated and get annoyed, but the more you kind of calm yourself and be articulate, like you said, you just get so much further. And I think that's, like I said, that's why I wanted you on here, because people can listen to that and people can take inspiration from that. Young black people, not just rugby players, athletes, not even just athletes, just anyone, can learn from
your life, your story that you put in the book, and like take things from it. And I think it's like that's the way forward, really. Just being articulate.
Well, that's you know, Lucas, that's very kind of you to say that, and it's also very important you say that, because I know I'm really hopeful for the future, because your generation, you know, my sons, you know, you're roughly the same age as my boys, so that Generation Z and Generation Alpha, which are the teenagers still at school,
even younger,
you guys are the ones leading this change for equality. And it's not just equality when it comes to diversity and race, it's also equality for sexual orientation, for people with physical disabilities, for gender. And it's great, but there is a but here. I think because of a lack of experience, a lot of the younger people, they want change, fantastic. They want change to happen now, fantastic. And when it doesn't happen, they get angry.
Yeah.
When you get angry, you lose your audience.
Yeah, definitely. And it almost knocks you back a couple steps, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's the when it doesn't happen, it's you take it on the chin and you keep pushing and keep fighting for it.
I mean, as I say in my book, I've had so many setbacks. And when you have a setback, you've got two options. You know, you're going to be angry and you're going to sulk. And if you do that, you're reinforcing some people's perceptions about you. Or you bounce yourself, pick yourself up, dust yourself down, and you keep moving forward and prove that you can do the job. And I know that is the way to go. Look, I've been incredibly lucky, but also successful in my life. I was the first Black teacher at St. Paul's, one of the great public schools in the country. I've been headmaster of 4 private prep schools. A Black man, headmaster of private prep schools. So I've had a really, really fantastic teaching and rugby career. And I think a lot of it's down to my ability as a teacher, as a rugby player, but also a lot of it's down to my ability as a human being to be kind, to be respectful, to be polite, but never ever to back down. And it's getting that balance.
Would you say that a lot of those, you know, because you've taken your success from rugby into teaching and education, would you say that you've learned a lot of your resilience from rugby, or would you say that it's kind of just been with you the whole way through from like from your book, it's been from the start of your life pretty much all the way through?
That's a great question. I mean, the resilience has always been there, because a lot of the people listening to this might not know, Lucas. I know you know. I was in care. I was looked after child, which meant that I wasn't living at home. I was taken into care from a very early age, and I didn't live at home with parents for that long. And when you're out of the family situation in a care home with other youngsters, some of them really tough, you learn to keep your head down and to be resilient. Because there are going to be lots of setbacks. You've got to just pick yourself up and carry on. And I learned resistance from my time there, which I then took into rugby. Being a black scrum half, trying to make my way in the game, and initially being sort of overlooked, and then people thinking, actually, he can do it, he can play. You know, you've just got to keep pushing back, keep proving to people. And your dad would have said this to you. I know this for a fact, Lucas. Your dad would have said this to you. And I've said the same to my boys. There were times I couldn't be just as good as other people. So I'm up against another scrum half who happens to be white. I can't be just as good because he's going to get selected. I've got to be so much better. So in all the things that I've done, I've gone out there to prove to people that I am the best by far. And if I'm the best by far, I might get a chance. If I'm not the best by far, I'm not going to be selected.
Definitely. That is definitely something my dad says.
And there's no point getting upset about it. That is just a fact.
Definitely. It goes across all, like everything in life, not just in sport, you know. Like you have to be better than the person next to you. And if you're in a situation like you were back then, and even people now, that you're not what people are used to, you almost have to be the best, and then that step even better just to prove to them, you know, I can stand out and I'm not just good, I'm very good.
Let me give an example. So my final year at school, so I was at Kingsbury High School with your dad. I was captain of the school team, captain of the county team, and the Middlesex County was a strong county. And we had a lot of county matches in the autumn, and we won most of them. But what they used to do is at Christmas, because Middlesex being a big county, had a lot of their good rugby boys were at boarding schools, and they would come home for Christmas. They would then have another round of county trials for the springtime games, and the games in January and February were basically the divisional trial matches.
Mm.
In the so I was captain of Middlesex, and then we had these Christmas trials. Who was I up against? The captain of Harrow School.
Okay.
Okay, so they select the squad for these matches.
Yeah.
The captain of Harrow, scrum half, white scrum half, he gets in as number 1. I get in as number 2. The first game we played was against Eastern Counties.
Mm.
Ben Young's dad, Nick Young's,
Okay.
good scrum half, scrum half, was playing for Eastern Counties, and the Harrow captain was playing for Middlesex, and of course captain. I was on the bench, and we're talking about the days when you didn't come off the bench unless there was an injury.
Yeah.
And I sat through this whole match watching Ben Young's dad destroy the guy that was playing where I should have been playing.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get on at all because they didn't have
Yeah.
substitution. It was only if you're really injured. The selectors realised their mistake. The second game, they put me in, and I played all the other county matches.
Wow.
But because I didn't play against Nick Young's, remember, I didn't play against him at all. He always went through as number 1. As we went through the division to the final England final trial together, but he was always the number 1 because I never had the opportunity to play against him.
Yeah.
And I didn't, because a white scrum half from Harrow School was put in
front of you, and it's you. The story could have been very different if you were up against him. Yeah.
Yep. But even then, the challenge is, even if I'd have got the better of Nick Young's, would the selectors have been brave enough? Now, it's interesting because I did go through all the way through to the England final trial, and I got myself injured before the final trial. But even then, I would have been on the bench, so I wouldn't have been. Nick Young's played, and he actually played for England schools that year.
Yeah.
And the guy that then replaced me in the England final trial, because I couldn't be part of it, went through as the reserve scrum half. So there was a strong chance that I could have been in the England squad even then. But look, that's rugby. You get injured, and these things happen.
Yeah, exactly. I can tell you about injuries for days that I've had. But it's interesting. I was going to say, just to kind of close it off a bit, I want to have you back on as well to talk about loads of things, because this conversation could just go on forever. I was just going to ask, do you feel like your experience in rugby has defined you, or would you say that it's not rugby, it's kind of just how life has gone for you that's kind of made you come out how you are now?
Lucas, that is a great question. I think rugby is definitely part of the thing that's defined me. But what's defined me was my parents coming over to Jamaica from Jamaica in 1956. So they were part of the Windrush generation. But my mum and dad divorced before I was 1. So I've never seen my mum. And sadly, she died back in the 1990s. So I've never ever, I have no image of my mum in my mind at all. But I know that I've got some of her qualities. I didn't have my dad's qualities. He wasn't a nice man. But living in that abusive family situation helped define me. Living in care helped define me. The challenges in rugby helped define me. But also, we haven't even touched on today the challenges in education and teaching and some of the challenges. But all of these things help define me to be the person I am. And I think one of the most important things that I've always wanted to do, Lucas, is to make sure that my boys and everybody else understand, whatever your start in life, whatever your background, education is the key. Because there's no question, in today's society, if you get yourself a good academic education, it opens doors for you. Irrespective of my rugby, it was my education that opened the doors for me.
Yeah.
There's no question about that.
Because if you hadn't gone to the colleges and things like that, you wouldn't have even been playing the rugby that you were playing. Yeah, definitely. Interest. It's very good. Like it's been great to talk to you, and I feel like people listening will take a lot from it. It's not even just the younger Black people out there. I think everyone can kind of learn something from your story and what you've been through, and just, if they can't take anything from it, at least they can understand, your story and what people do go through. So I think it's been a pleasure to have you on, and like I said, I would love to have you back. I think we could talk, like I said, this conversation could have gone on for hours, and we could definitely talk about many other
That's very kind of you. And if I could leave one message for the audience that potentially going to listen to it, and that is, you've heard me talk about the education. I'm a headmaster, retired headmaster, so I'm going to talk about that. The other thing I want people to do is they mustn't be afraid to have the difficult conversations with other people. So many of my white friends, Lucas, you know, in the last 2 or 3 years, particularly since the murder of George Floyd, they want to get involved in the conversation. They want to see how they can help, but they don't know how to start the conversation because they don't want to embarrass themselves. They don't want to say the wrong things. Definitely. And I'm saying, you're my friend. You're not going to embarrass yourself. If you say something that's wrong, you haven't done it deliberately, and I'll just politely correct you.
Yeah.
But people must have the conversations, because if we have the conversations, we just have a better understanding of each other.
Exactly. I completely agree with that. I think that's a great message, and I think everyone listening can take that from it as well. Like, you know, I've got a lot of white friends, and I think I could say the same thing to them. Like, I'd love to have conversations like that with them. I don't want people to hold back, because that's almost part of the problem. You don't get the full story if you hold back, and you need the full story. You need to understand the worst parts of it to get the best out of it, you know?
Correct. And it's a slight plug. If people don't want to buy my book, and I totally understand if they don't, there's a 15-minute documentary, Sky Sports. I mean, I've been very lucky. So Black History Month last year, Sky Sports did a documentary on me. So if people want to sort of just have a look, just to get a bit more of an understanding about what I stand for and how I'm trying to make the world a better place for everyone.
Please do go and watch that. I've seen it, and it's very, very good watch. Thank you very much, Floyd, for being on. And everyone listening, I'm sure I'll be back probably next week with another podcast. So I'll see you then. Cheers, Floyd.
Hey, no problem. Speak to you soon, Lucas.
Bye.
Bye.